Hey everybody, this is Perch. The comics are too expensive. I believe they are, and I believe it is a problem, particularly if you're trying to encourage new readers to come in. To pay $4.99, pay $5 for something that you can read in 5 minutes is that's tough. That's a tough value proposition. It's tough in any world. Imagine if it was $5 for 5 minutes of movie. That would be tough. People would balk at that. I mean, even if you think about something that was really well produced, some incredible, Avengers in-game level special effects and all the characters on the screen and everything else. If you were trying to regularly charge $5 for a 5 minute show, people aren't going to take that. It's going to be no matter how good it is, you're going to have trouble finding a market. Just like you would with games. Take the latest Assassin's Creed. If you announce that, hey, good news, the new game is not $60, it's $5, but you're going to be able to finish that game in 5 minutes. That game's not going to get a lot of takers. There's lots of games on in the PlayStation Store and the Xbox Store that are at that $5 to $10 range, but even there, they're kind of trying to tell you that you're going to get a couple hours at least of play experience. It's a tough value proposition, but here's the thing, and it's this argument that I've made that comics really are too expensive, which frankly I don't think is a controversial argument. I think it's a fairly obvious one, based on the lack of new incoming readers and people coming into the picture. I think to me, I struggle to acknowledge that there's a debate that can be had on it, because I don't think there is. I think it's pretty clear that's the case. But this argument is what's got me labeled a lot of bad things. There's been plenty of comic creators who've blocked me over this exact comment, and one of the more coherent. Because I was talking/complaining about this to a friend, and they're like, "Well, you do understand that by saying comics are too expensive, you're inadvertently saying that creators should get paid less." Took me a minute. I'm like, it's not what I think I'm saying at all. But let me turn that over in my head a little bit. And there is a weird background, back into it truth there, in the sense that here this is the shame of comics, is that something that's going to take you 5 minutes to read. And I think there have been some blogs, there have been some people have pointed out that comics back in the 80s took longer to read than comics in 2000. Why? More thought bubbles, generally more speaking more text to kind of go through. There's fewer splash pages. It was typically a little bit more of a dense read. A lot of comics. If you pick up, I don't know, the newest issue of Thor, and a copy of Thor from, I don't know, one of Walt Simonson's issues, not the one where he did all splash pages, but just one of the other ones. It'll take longer to read the Walt Simonson one. It will take longer to read old X Factor by Louis Simonson and then current X Factor by Leah Williams. It's just the pages are a little bit more dense. Not terribly dense, but they are. Things have gotten a little bit lighter and breezier where the comic is concerned. But all the same, for the creation of that comic, you are talking about a lot of time. Even though it may not always feel like it, writers are spending hours, and with revisions and everything else, putting together comics. Several writers say, to write a comic, it takes them days. And it probably does. To draw and render that comic, especially if the penciler's doing the penciling and the inking, even if they're cheating by kind of doing both in one, which I know several artists who do, you're still talking about, many artists say they try and achieve a page a day. So if you just work that out, 22-page book, or a 7-page book with the in the X-Men line with all the data sheets, that is a shot. I'm sorry, children. At any rate, 22-page book. If it's a page a day, that's 22 days. It's almost a month. And when you think about all this time, the colorists, the letters, and everybody putting time into it, a lot of hours and a lot of times going into this book, regardless of whether we think the quality has decreased over time. It's still a lot of time. And yet the end product is going to be read and consumed in 5 minutes. And so if you say, and like I have said, I think comics are too expensive, that the price has to come down, And in many cases, the rates for a lot of artists and people who are on the creative side have also come down over the last several decades. It is that's not a great value proposition. That's like I get it. I get why an artist, perhaps hearing me say it, would say, "I see. This is going to drive down the amount of money we make for comics, which in turn is going to drive down the amount of money that I'm going to make." And they're not wrong. Based on the current structure and the corporations, yeah, if suddenly started selling the comics for, $1.99 or $2.99, then you're going to see, you're going to see costs cut somewhere. The comic companies aren't a charity; they're going to want their take. And if we're going to lower the price of the comics, then everybody is going to get squeezed, and which does mean, yes, the creators will make less money. Now, if you've heard enough of my videos, you know that I am in favor of creators making more money. So, these two things don't go in agreement, but also, hey, calm down a little bit. If you're getting really angry and feisty with me because you think I'm trying to take money out of your pocket, I just would point you to, right now I'm one of the loudest, probably most irritating voices on the outside advocating for more money for you, just for what it's worth. But um, the amount of the challenge here is we're trying to do two things at once. We're trying to lower the price of comics to end customers, and we're trying to raise the rates of the people who are actually putting those comics together. So how do we accomplish that without lowering the overall profit that Disney and AT&T ultimately want to make from these comics? Well, there's kind of two things that could be done, not both together, but maybe. The first is that Disney and AT&T can kind of admit or acknowledge or give up, in the sense that they're not in it for profit, they're in it for marketing. And if they're in it for marketing, that means that the real moneymaker are games and licenses and TV shows and things like that. And so actually making a profit off these comic books is secondary. So then now you're setting the expectations for your business down to break even, or maybe even lose money. And that would allow you some margin. If you suddenly cut out any of your desires to make money, then that would help. Now, the companies aren't going to do this. Disney and AT&T are not going to run a business that way. I don't think they're going to. They wouldn't view comics as effective marketing, and there would be seismic changes. I mean, the executives would vanish out of both companies. You move to a very, very different world, and frankly, the quality would drop further, because now if you're doing it at a no profit marketing only job, then whether it sells or not becomes irrelevant. And so then you just try and drive your cost down as much as possible. So you would get very poor quality in that world. The other way to do it, and I think probably the way that is more successful or would have a higher chance of actually making things happen in the short term, is you got to sell advertising and sponsorships more. It means ads have to go in those comics. The addition of adding pages with ads in the comic would not cost much. You're talking about a very, very negligible printing cost and additional kind of unit to that comic. But you could sell ads, and especially if you're getting one ad deal and running across all the comics, then you can put up some pretty big distribution numbers for in return, because you're looking at your entire line, not just a single comic. That's kind of how they did it in the past, and that is something they could do again in the future. The other thing they could do is really leverage what they're doing with digital, which means get a lot more ads into the digital product that you're putting out and use that to drive down the cost of digital. Basically, you may not be making more, but you're not making less, and you're able to drive the cost down, which in theory should mean you can move more units. And if you move more units, then you're getting more overall interest. You're getting this next generation hooked on comics. To me, I think there's going to have to be a little of both. I do think we need to have advertising and sponsorship back, particularly for the big two, and probably some of the bigger indies as well, just to find ways to knock a dollar off the cover price. And then at the same time, I think the big guys probably need to at least lower their margin expectations for these comics, meaning they are going to expect they're going to make a little less because they are a vehicle to the movies. And somehow somebody very talented within Marvel or DC would have to go before the other executive committee and whoever's making the decision and make a very strong, compelling case that we need to keep hiring talented artists, because that's going to have the most effective marketing bang, even if we can reduce our prices somewhat. I think that's really, we're going to have to do a little of both. I think comic publishers are going to have to submit to ads and also be willing to take less margin and go for 10 years. Like, commit to a longer period of time. Here's where I think, as both a message to the market and to retailers and to the distributor and everybody else, if Marvel was coming out and saying, we're moving the price, all comics, down to $2.99. And we are going to leave that price. We're committing to leaving it that price that way for 10 years. So we will revisit this topic again in 2031, but it's going to be $2.99 until then. Thank you very much. That would send a good message to the to comics, to the industry. Now, again, you have to do all of these things very carefully, because if you do them out of sequence or out of order, then you do risk tipping everything over. You risk lowering, getting rid of the margin to the point that a bunch of comics get canceled because they're just not seen as profitable at all. So you have to have that alignment. You do have to make sure that whatever you do, you're not splitting the price break with the retailer who doesn't have those more units to move right now. I mean, the retailer will be happy to take a price cut in their margin if there was an equatable number of new people coming in the door. The comic shop would easily take that trade, because more people in the door means more lifetime customers. It means more ability to do what you want to do, more ability to stay in business, have a stable cash flow, all that kind of stuff. But overall, I mean, it's a tough topic. Sorry, it's not a tough topic. There is a weird level of pushback and kind of disgruntled feelings on this. And the only thing I could say is, if you're a creator and you're hearing this right now, I'm not trying to take money out of your pocket. You need more money in your pocket. When I see prices need to go down, I also, same breath, say your rates need to go up. That's what really needs to happen in terms of creation and distribution of these comics. Anyway, what do you think? Price cut, can it happen? What would be the conditions in which it would happen? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe, and thanks for listening.